Wednesday morning on the Joe Thomas in the Morning Show. Celebrating everyone's inner Tedness, and of course that is embodied by finding out, and this is the hard part of, getting your Ted on, is finding out what you're gifted with, what God has gifted you, what talent God has gifted you with, then employing it with all the zeal and enthusiasm that you can muster on a daily basis for a grateful constituency who compensate you fairly, and then, you know what? You can honestly not care less what anyone else says about you. And you know what? One by one, they'll all start falling in with you saying, he's right all along. Or, at least he wasn't doing it from a place of malice. I said we're probably going to, if not break some rules of radio, we're going to break some tenets, things like that, because there are some misconceptions people have, and I don't mean to say you're right or wrong. There are people who either think that the conservatives of Charlottesville all live in the same house, like one of the frats out on Rugby, and we know everything about each other all the time. And then there are other people who think that we're in like some sort of Bloods versus Crips competition. Neither is true. So when I heard about this story, I said, I don't know anything about what happened with my good friend, and he's been my friend almost as long as I've been hanging out with you on the receiving end of the radio, Rob Schilling. As a matter of fact, I knew Rob before Rob knew me, because I had, here's an inside baseball story, I had actually applied for his job when I was unemployed up in Wilmington in Philadelphia. They were pitching, and I looked up his company, and I said, why in the world would you want to change a morning show with a former city councilor and a 20-year journalist on it? But they did. They wanted to change it, and so I applied for the gig. I didn't get it. Obviously, I got this one instead, which I didn't even know about. So I've known Rob for a long time, and I didn't know he was running into an issue. And it's a little ironic because I asked Mark Warner if he had any actual evidence of people who had their voting rights infringed. Since everyone asks me if I have any evidence of voter fraud, I thought I'd turn the tables on him. And he said,
I have no evidence that there were people in 2020 that were had their rights to vote restricted.
See, now, and he's qualified there because what's happened to our friend Rob is in 2021. And unfortunately, this is an exclusive on WCHV because gags have been placed as well. Attorney for the plaintiff and one of our, also our dear friends, Matt Hardin, is on the Newsmakers line with us. He is representing Rob Schilling in a case of vote suppression. Matt, how you doing this morning?
Well, I'm doing good, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
Now, I'm not nearly as eloquent as a barrister as yourself, so paint the picture. What happened to Rob that has got you and him in court against, I guess, Albemarle County?
Well, there are four defendants rather, and I'll talk about it from the beginning. He went to vote at the primary election earlier this month at the Woodbrook precinct in Albemarle County. And this is after the mask mandate was lifted by the governor. Even back when the mask mandate did exist, they said they would not turn anybody away from the polls.
Uh-huh.
But the poll workers attempted to turn him away and basically said he couldn't vote without a mask. So if you know anything about Rob, he doesn't take that sort of thing lightly. And he said, no, I'm here to vote. I'm here to vote. And he insisted that he was going to vote.
And he knew the law. He knew what the law was. He knew he was permitted to vote.
In fact, he has correspondence from where he wrote the registrar ahead of time, basically saying, you're not going to turn people away, are you? And they said no. So, I mean, he had even looked into this before he showed up to vote.
Smart. Very, very smart to do that. That's good stuff.
Well, so as I say, Rob's a fighter, and when you tell him that he has to wear a mask to vote, and he knows that's not the law, he's not going to, run away. But anyway, so Rob decided he was going to vote anyway, and two of the poll workers put hands on him trying to stop him from voting. he did eventually vote, and the video of the whole incident is on SchillingShow.com. One of the things that I'm actually asking for help from your listening audience is two of the individuals who put hands on him. We actually don't know their names. One of the individuals who was there, we do know his name. He was wearing a name tag, and that was Leo Malik. But the other individuals are sued as John Does because we don't know who they were. And so if your listeners happen to watch the video on SchillingShow.com, we'd like to know who these people are so that we can properly name them in the lawsuit.
So he was physically removed from the polling place by Leo? Really?
Well, when he walks in the door, he's greeted by the chief officer of the election, which is Leo Malik, and Leo Malik tries to deny him entrance, and he essentially walks around Leo, and the lawsuit doesn't allege that Leo Malik laid hands on him.
Oh, okay, all right.
But two other poll workers did lay hands on him at various points, one in the entrance to the building and one in the proper polling area. And again, they didn't actually eject him. They just attempted to eject him. But it's our position that that's not supposed to happen to voters. And
Matt, I've got to run on a break here, so I don't want to leave this hanging. Did he actually vote on June 8th? Was he allowed to?
He was able to vote. Eventually, he was able to vote, yes.
Okay, all right. I want to follow up on this because there's a reason. This is an exclusive to Joe Thomas in the Morning here about Rob Schilling and the Schilling Show, and I'll tell you what that is, or maybe Matt will tell you what that is in a moment. Ted Steve Morning on Joe Thomas in the Morning, visiting with somebody. We are, a lesser community because he's not in our public defense, a former Commonwealth's attorney for Greene County, but still out there working for liberty for all of us. And at some point, maybe we'll have time, I'll catch up on what Matt Hardin is doing in abstract. But right now he's working for my friend Rob Schilling in a case where you're bringing suit against Albemarle County or 5 plaintiffs over this voting brouhaha, Matt. Can you, and when we discussed this before the show, I said, I don't want to get Rob in trouble with his employers because, we all got bills to pay, and I don't want to do that. I have, a particular attitude towards, my employment. I believe I work for my listeners, but, and that has kept me sane for 14 years here in Charlottesville. But why is this the only place anyone's heard about this? Rob does still have an albeit truncated show every day.
I'm not sure why the media is not reporting this story. We did put out a plea, especially because, as I said, we would like to identify these two John Does. So we put out a plea. The media has not reported it, and I'm not privy to what's going on at WINA. But I will say I had an interview scheduled and announced on the air, and then that interview was canceled. So I'm not sure why the story's not out there.
Well, and far be it for me to carry anyone else's water. It's hard enough to carry mine. I'm just saying that, this is, you would think somebody would be able to tell their own stories on their own radio shows. So I'm sorry for that. So you need some help. You want people to watch the video, SchillingShow.com. And see if you can't help with some of the John Does in the suit. But catch us up. So what happens next with this proceeding, with this suit?
Well, the defendants are going to be served. The two defendants who we know the names of, that would be Jake Washburn and Leo Malik. They're going to be served hopefully this week, and then they'll have an answer due 21 days after that. One of the things that we're hopeful is that they know who the John Does are because they were also at the polls that day. And, of course, Jake Washburn runs the elections in Albemarle County, so he ought to know who's working at the polls. So hopefully we'll get that issue resolved. And Leo's
last name is Malik, so you'd think he'd know as well because, there's not a lot of Maliks around there. So
it is a well-known name.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can resolve that issue, either because the listeners help us out or because the defendants will admit, who these other John Does are. But the lawsuit really can't proceed much further until we figure out who these John Does are that are in the video. And they're wearing masks, but I think you can see enough of their face that if you know them in real life, you can probably figure out who they are. And hopefully we'll get some information on that soon.
What is the relief you're seeking? And again, I haven't done a lot of civil litigation. Thank goodness I haven't been I haven't been the defendant in one either. But so I think it's called relief. That's what you're seeking is a judgment, right?
Right. So the most important thing I think we're seeking is an injunction, because this shouldn't happen again. What happened to Rob shouldn't happen again. Voters are supposed to be able to vote easily and exercise their rights. They're entitled to vote, and they're supposed to be able to cast a ballot without hassle, without problems, without having people lay their hands on them. So we're seeking an injunction to say, going forward, this should never happen again. And as I mentioned earlier, Rob had asked whether it was going to happen this time and was told no. So we're not sure what else we can do to make clear this isn't going to happen, but hopefully an injunction will help. And then, of course, Rob's also seeking actual damages for what happened to him. And the fun thing about most of these civil rights statutes, including the voting rights statutes, is that there's also a provision for attorney's fees, because if you have your rights violated, you shouldn't have to pay to get your rights vindicated.
Yeah, no, it's a very good
so
thing.
As an attorney, I'm excited about that, but it should work for everybody.
Well, but that's also a very good thing, because a lot of people, look at the legal system and say, oh my gosh, I mean, I don't know what you get an hour, but lawyers generally get more per hour than talk show hosts do. And for good reason. I mean, you have to keep up on tens of millions of pages of legal code in order to defend us. But if you are wronged, you should be able to get into a courtroom and make it right.
Well, I think that's exactly why these statutes exist, is because the legislature knew that it's very expensive to hire a lawyer. And a lot of people, if they're told, you can sit down and be quiet, or you can pay $10,000 to hire a lawyer, will sit down and be quiet. But that's not what we want as a society. We want people to stand up, and if they have to, hire lawyers and go to court and make it better, not just for them, but for everybody, because that's how society sort of vindicates our constitutional wrongs, as we get courts to rule that things have to be fixed, and it doesn't just affect the plaintiffs, it affects all of us.
Well, existentially, that has been the issue over the last 2 years of, I noticed there were people, they seemed like they were marching down the streets of several cities in America saying that there was no justice or there wasn't going to be peace until there was justice. This seems to be a justice issue, doesn't it?
Well, and I will say, despite, again, Mr. Schilling having hands laid on him, he believes in the justice system. He doesn't think that, this is a time to take to the streets, that he's not threatening a breach of the peace. He's doing what he's supposed to do. He's going to court, and he's seeking a ruling. And I think that's what everybody should be doing.
Well, and that's what, one of my more controversial things that I've pointed out is I think not only are we underrepresented in our governing, I don't think with almost four times as many citizens in the United States, I don't think the number of courtrooms has kept up because we're supposed to have access to a defense, to a speedy trial if we're the accused. And I just don't think, we've kept pace with the number of Americans, the number of Virginians there are, and the number of courthouses. But that's one of my particular crosses that I march around with. Matt, catch us up. We got a couple of minutes here. Enough about Rob. Let's talk about you for a second. What have you been doing since you left Greene County? Are you still out there fighting for folks' liberties? Tell us what you've been up to.
I do all I can. I represent a couple of nonprofit groups in open records cases all over the country. I was actually in court in 3 different states last week, and I believe 2 this week so far. So I'm still fighting the fight, mostly for government transparency, but anything that we can do to help protect your rights, whether it's transparency or whether it's a constitutional issue, that's what I'm about, and that's what I did before I was elected, and that's still what I'm doing. So happy to keep working on it as long as people will have me.
And the video is at shillingshow.com.
It absolutely is. Please let us know who these John Does are.
And where can people, contact you? Is it matthardin.com or, where should people visit your website or Facebook?
It's matthewhardin.com, MATTHEW.
See, I'm a New Yorker. We always over-familiarize things. Matthew, I'm sorry. I apologies for that. Hey, tell Rob I said good luck. I'm sorry for the situation that has made this the only place anyone's heard this story. But that's how I roll. I'll talk to you soon, my friend. You be good.
All right, thanks, Joe. You have a great morning.